welcome to another episode of Horror Movie Night. This week, we are talking about only our second Scream movie that we've ever done an episode on, which is insane.
Significantly better than the last one.
Yeah, the last one was Scream 3, the worst in the entire franchise. We're talking about Scream 2, which, I'm not going to lie, I used to be like, this is the second best Scream movie. It's this or Scream 4, easily. I think this one may have slid down just a couple rungs. There's a few things in this movie now that I'm watching it that I'm like, this does not make sense to me. No.
I think it really sets the tone for how sequels can be. Do you know what I mean? I think it's sort of like it does that thing where it achieves a level of you can do this with a sequel. You can make this sort of insular universe and this expansive thing, and it's the world knows about what has happened, in this small chain of events. So it's the scale in which you can make a sequel exists, but I totally agree. I still think it's really good, and I think I've maybe only seen it. I think this is maybe only maybe my third time watching it. This is
definitely
my
third time as well.
But
I mean, here's what I'll say. I've always defended this movie. Well, I didn't. When I first saw it, I was pissed, as every person who loves Scream was, that they had the audacity to kill Randy. But then they watching it this time, man, they really did a good job of making Randy someone you wanted to see get killed, because he's annoying.
That's what I've always thought.
He's so much more unbearable in this movie than he is in the first one.
You know, this is maturity for you, Matt. That is you maturing as a person, because literally, when we started Reddit Horror Club, when it was you and me doing the thing, I remember you being like, oh, Randy, I was Randy, you were talking about how you were Randy all the time. And I'm like, Randy deserved to fucking die in the second movie. I don't know how to tell this to my new friend.
He's insufferable. No, it's
yes. But you were this annoying motherfucker back in 1999, dude.
But my defense for this movie, when I came around to enjoying Scream 2, I've seen this movie tens of times, I'm sure, because Homeboy, if he starts a franchise, is just well, guess I got to watch every entry in that franchise
today.
But my defense has always been that scene in film class sets up the expectation of this is bad, and you can't. I feel like this isn't a movie where you can sit there and call out the unrealistic nature of elements of it, because they already inform you in that conversation about sequels that these are illogical movies. Sequels to films are always illogical. What my problem is that there seems to be a lot of half-baked ideas that should have just been cut from the movie that are still there. And the biggest one that jumped out to me that I forgot, that's how unnecessary it is the scene with the police where they're connecting the names of the first three victims with the names of the first three victims from the first movie. That never comes up again throughout the rest of this movie. It has no purpose to be there. That's how you know it's a copycat
the energy
killer.
And the tone matches. It's not that those are not the things that are out of place, but you're right. The information, and it's not even a throw off the scent of
real
what's happening.
Procedure, guys.
That's
what police work is all about.
It's so outrageous.
That's more than the police do, honestly. That is more than I've ever seen.
And to go back to that film class for just 1 second, this movie very incorrectly set up my expectations for what a college film class was like. It certainly was not a teacher just posing a question and letting the students riff out their impressions of movies for 20
Let me tell you something. The film student in Tequila Body Shots was more realistic than any of the film talk
I'm gonna
here
go
in
jerk
Scream
off
2.
at the theater.
Yeah. Kyle could relate. He's like, that's how it was for me, baby.
Yeah, no, that's a rite of passage. You have to go jerk off at a theater, whether it's porn or it's Fellini.
So
it doesn't matter.
You just said porn twice.
So I have at least two notes just tied to my frustration of the opening scene of this movie. Not anything about what happens in the movie per se, but I wrote, I'm going to read both of these verbatim. I've never been to a theater as rowdy as this. And I've been to some pretty wild movie theaters. I would hate watching a movie in this environment. It's why I don't go to midnight screenings of Rocky Horror Picture Show. Also, it'd be so goddamn hard to watch a movie wearing that scream mask.
I want to watch a movie. It's like wearing sunglasses. What's the why are you doing that?
It blows my mind that Matt, of all people, is like that I am mirrored his sentiments in the first act of, or the first scene of this movie, because I literally was like, Jada's kill always bums me out. Like, it feels tragic, it feels unfair. Was there a reason why she was picked as a murder victim?
Because her last name was Stevens.
Oh.
Or was she Maureen?
That's fucking stupid.
It was Maureen.
Really
her first name was Maureen.
Her first name was Maureen. Her last name was Evans.
And
Phil Stevens. Which, do you know how strong a human being has to be to slam a hunting knife through
a bathroom stall
wall and into a skull?
I mean, to be fair, it went into his cheek, right?
Either way, the first part's the most unrealistic.
Well,
that's
Timothy Oliphant, right? Like, he's the one who's doing the killing.
That's the one that we've concluded.
He is fantastic.
Yeah,
really.
Timothy Oliphant's great. He's, as far as because I always want to check. I always want to know. I want to know what the internet suspicions are of who's doing what when there's the multiple killers. Everyone pretty much concluded that Randy is the only person that Mrs. Loomis kills. That everything else is Mickey. Yeah. But that Mrs. Loomis is probably the voice on the phone a couple times. But
I don't even think that she killed. I don't think she stabbed anyone. I honestly don't think that she stabbed anyone, because she is frail as fuck.
Well, but she admits to killing Randy in the final scene. She literally says, like, "Don't besmirch my son's boy. I got stabby because Randy did." Like,
oh, that's right. That's stupid, though. There's no way that the most brutal kill of the entire movie
is from the little
45-year-old
hell hath no fury like an angry mom.
And to be fair, I have a drink. It's for this week. It's mom water. It's not good. But Megan, we're in the grocery store, and Megan was like,
"Did you get the variety?"
No. I could only stand the flavor profile, blueberry peach. So that's Linda. The other ones sound absolutely terrible. This isn't good, but at least it's not. I don't have to go. I only had to buy a 4-pack.
Thank God.
Anyway, Megan was like, "What's the point of Scream 2 again?" I was like, "Oh, it's Billy's mom is the killer." And she was like, "Oh, what about that mom water stuff?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. I wonder if they have any." And it took forever to fucking find it. We had other things that came up instead, and then we found it.
Well, while we're talking about Mrs. Loomis, I have to say my memory is that she does not show up as much in this movie as she actually shows up. I don't know if I felt like I was watching an extended cut of this movie, because in my memories, it's like she shows up in the beginning and introduces herself to Gail Weathers, and then maybe pops up one more time before they reveal who she is. She's in this movie 8 goddamn times, and I completely blocked so many of them out.
Well, I think that and I think that that's also a testament to what we were talking about, is where the aging process of it doesn't necessarily work as well, and it's so she shows up 8 times, so there should be a reason that we believe that she's part of this.
Never, when I watched this movie, there was the first time, there was not even a moment in my brain that I thought that little old lady had anything to do with anything.
Which I think is which I think is interesting that she shows up that much and we don't even consider her, right? There's something there, right? But then upon review, it's geez, man.
They just keep reminding you, she's here.
Yeah. Do you remember that Billy had a mom? Yeah. Do you know?
You know what? That's also, I gotta say,
that cared about him.
Not that many slasher films have ever brought that up. In all of the sequels that we've had, the only one that I can think of is that Jason's mom died first. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of we don't know what Mrs. Krueger was. Well, I guess we did learn that too in the sequels.
Yeah, but she also isn't a murderer.
That's true.
That's true.
Also,
what was that sound?
Just because I finished my one from last episode and mom water came up. Joy number 2, because it says a joy to have watched the second movie in this franchise.
Perfect.
It's kind of weak, but that's what I have.
It is what it is. There's two more things that I forgot about with this movie that struck me as
Who picked
weird.
this, by the way?
I did.
Sorry.
This was me.
Oh, you did? Okay.
That struck me as weird.
I would never
and
pick a
interesting.
Scream movie.
Yeah.
I
Not that I don't like
them,
them, but rather
I
I leave them to Matt.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, and I know what this pick will do for downloads, just based
Yeah,
on
50% of this is SEO.
Dry January. We are good to go.
There's two things that I completely forgot about in this movie. First off, Lindsay Bluth as a sorority girl, completely forgot about that.
Girl.
Portia de Rossi. Yeah, pretty funny.
I was like, holy shit.
But also we get Rebecca Gayheart as another sorority girl.
Yeah.
Which honestly, I love. What was Rebecca? Was Rebecca Gayheart in Urban Legend, right?
Yeah,
that was the one.
Don't spoil anything. But the other thing that I forgot about,
Delete it.
Which
Delete
doesn't.
it!
Let me ask you guys this, because this did not click in my brain, or this didn't compute in my brain. I just really struggle with the idea that Sidney would want to be a theater major. Like so much of this movie is about how she doesn't want to be in the spotlight and wants to just live a normal life, but her college major is something that guarantees that you're always in the
Maybe
spotlight.
she just wanted to do tech.
Well, he literally says this is your major when she's trying to not act in the play. That's what I mean.
Well,
I'm just
Sydney she's working through some stuff.
Yeah,
all right?
a little bit. Also, let me ask you this question. There's a scene in this movie that the framing choice is really weird. When Dewey shows up the first time and he's having a conversation with Sid, in my opinion, it is shot like he is a romantic interest. It is this extreme close-up of their two faces talking, and it's just this soft piano music playing underneath them. And I know that that's not the intention, because so much of this movie is about Dewey and Gale Weathers, but I'm like, why is this filmed like this?
You guys remember that infamous Folgers commercial?
Yes,
it's that.
It literally felt like that. I was like, what is happening here? They must have watched that scene and been like, oh, we've got to address this, because the line of dialogue immediately after that is Jerry O'Connell being like, who is that guy? And Sid's like, that's Dewey. He's like all of our big brother. It's like, whoo.
But specifically, how does Jerry O'Connell not know anything?
Yeah. Yes. That's a bit. Jerry O'Connell is completely out of the loop of his girlfriend's whole life, which is insane. Also, have to say it, I've always kind of thought this, but man, did I have to fast forward through the I Think I Love You scene. That is some cringy bullshit in the middle of this movie.
And the thing is that why would Sid, who hates the spotlight, enjoy being poorly a cappella'd that song in front of the entire cafeteria?
An afternoon,
and then
the
she's
same
smiling.
The afternoon after she just told him, look, we can't date. It's in my brain. Again, it's retrospective. In retrospect, in my brain, I was like, this serenading thing happens a few days after she tells him that they probably should.
He had to make an effort.
Day.
He had to make the effort immediately.
This is so fascinating to me. I'm trying to think about what we've talked about Wes Craven, and I think that we keep narrowing in because we've talked about many Craven films here.
Yeah.
Both actual episodes and then tangentially, right? Mm-hmm. And he has a pattern. Craven has a pattern of things that hit and then things that start to sort of trickle down, right? And it's even though we've talked up Scream 2 and we've talked about it, we've included in our really good sequels and all this stuff. It does follow that pattern. Just he has studio money. Yeah. So it follows that pattern that it does drop off at the same step, but he has studio money and backing to be able to be well, Scream 2 is still okay.
Well, but
it's really not that.
Let me address this though.
I don't know.
So I think if I'm remembering this correctly, I believe that Wes Craven agreed to do, like, I want to say it was Scream 3. It could be Scream 2. He agreed to do a horror movie in exchange for doing Music of the Heart.
Music of the Heart.
Which was the movie that he, like, wanted to make. And I couldn't help but think about that when I'm watching this this Neve Campbell and Jerry O'Connell stuff, because I'm like, this feels so out of place. This feels like a director who's stuck doing horror movies that's like, maybe I can do a couple scenes to prove I can do like romantic comedies, or that I can do like anything else in horror, because that whole scene, beyond like the awkwardness of it, then it's like the swell of collective souls. She's like, that scene feels like it has nothing to do with a horror movie. That feels like any 90s teen flick you've ever seen, like the ending shot of like 10 Things I Hate About You. You know what I mean? Like, I really think he was just like, fuck, if they're going to give me all this money to make the sequel, I'm going to try to like add a scene to my reel to prove that I can do something more than horror movies.
Can you imagine being Wes Craven being like, I need to add to my reel?
I need to add to my reel. So here's a weird, while we're talking about Wes Craven, here's a weird thought that I had the other day, was I was thinking about,
he's always climbing. He's never trying to. He never settles.
Here's my weird thing that I was thinking about. I was thinking about Tobe Hooper, John Carpenter, Wes Craven, right? Probably like the three top horror directors who've been around for 3 decades, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And what I found myself thinking was that each one of those directors, their style feels trapped in a specific decade, no matter what. So to me, it was like Tobe Hooper, I feel like even when he's doing 80s and 90s movies, still feels like a very 70s director with the way he does stuff, like with his framing.
This.
John Carpenter, I think, always feels like a very 80s director. Like, beyond the fact that his peak stuff is the 80s, it just has that sheen and that look of 80s. I think Wes Craven really found his style in the 90s. And then when I think of something like Nightmare on Elm Street, for that movie being 84, it feels closer to the end of the 80s than the middle of the 80s to me. Like, I think
that's interesting.
Stylistically, he kind of was the guy who got the 90s look better than any of them, and I think that's why he succeeded in the 90s more than the other two.
Well, here's the question then for you is, do you think, is it possible that it's the inverse, that the popularity of the Nightmare series in the 80s thanks to him, precluded and led to
what the 90s look.
It could aesthetic that was brought.
It could be an influence thing.
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Interesting.
It's a rhetorical question.
It is. It's absolutely rhetorical.
We'll never know.
But speaking of the 80s, I have to say one of my favorite parts in this whole movie is right before Randy dies, and the killer asks his favorite scary movie, and he turns the question on them, and then just rattles off like every single college and sorority horror film that he can think of, where he's just like, House on Sorority Row, Graduation Day, Final Exam, Sorority House Massacre. Like, I was like, great. I still love that scene. I think they do it even better in Scream 4 when she rattles off every single remake that had come out in the last 5 years. Like, one of my favorite scenes in any horror movie. It's so well done. And then, Homeboy's gotta love that his boy Randy could have been saved if not for people dancing to Cottonmouth King's Suburban Life.
It'll get you every time.
It makes me laugh every time.
Don't listen to Cottonmouth Kings.
No.
It will kill you.
No, you can't trust those guys.
That's why I always listen to ICP instead, guys.
Yes. Be safe. Listen to ICP.
Scott, let me ask you a question. I'm going to set you up on this, but I think I believe in you. If you had to say what is the most quotable moment in this entire movie, what is it? Because to me, there's only one answer.
Carnage Candy.
Ooh, that is a good one. That is not what I was leaning to. I was leaning to another 2-word delivery, which is, of course, Timmy Elephant going, Billy's mother.
Well, that one wasn't in the trailer, and so that one doesn't come to mind as much because all I can see is Billy with his shitty fucking goatee, soul patch goatee thing, whatever it is, and he just goes, Carnage can't, like, or not Billy, Randy. I was so happy when Randy got axed in this version, like this time around. I felt no sadness, no grief, no loss. I felt like I feel grief for Jada Pinkett Smith's character because it's a terrible way to go out and to have everybody like jeering at your death.
Yeah.
Also, that would be like, we got off topic before I could say it, but when you were talking about it, like, you would hate watching a movie like that. I would have a panic attack.
Yeah.
Because I would be like worried about a mass shooter.
Well, so
because remember, a decade ago when there were those mass shootings.
The worst screening experience of my life, and it was a fairly calm screening experience, was when I went to see Joker on opening night.
Oh, that sounds terrible.
Because if you remember, there was all these like internet things about like people are worried about this.
Yeah.
So walking into a movie theater and there being 2 armed policemen standing outside of my movie.
I remember you telling me this. Yeah.
And then it was like there was like no one in my theater. There was like 8 people at this screening because I didn't go to like a midnight screening. It was like Thursday at 6. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm sitting there and literally every time there's so many gunshots in that movie. Every single time that a gunshot happened in the movie, I looked to the door. Like I was like, I don't. And then as I remember the theater was empty enough, and my anxiety was so high from the circumstances. I left to go to the bathroom, turned back on my phone, opened the wiki for the movie, read the full wiki description so I knew everything that was about to happen for the last like 25 minutes of the movie. And when I knew that it was near the end of the movie, I got up and got as close to the exit as possible. And the second that it went black, I just left because I was like, I need to get out to fresh air. Like I was having a full-blown panic attack just from the circumstances in an empty, calm screening of a movie. This circumstance, you're out of your goddamn mind. I'd be asking for a refund so quick. I'd be like, hey, I want to check out this Meg Ryan movie. Can we?
I think if I remember correctly, that theater that they shot in now is a mega church, which doesn't make us feel any better.
No.
But it just
also how is it that Sid turns on all of the well, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm fast forwarding to the you're talking about the theater in the beginning.
Yeah.
The theater at the end, when Sid like turns on all of the sound effects and all the visual, like the lights and stuff like that, why does she also shake the thunder
It's got to get the thunder going, baby. It's got to be scary for Mickey.
That's not going to help because it's going to immediately stop as soon as you stop, and she's going to know that you're running around. I mean, okay, this movie is so illogical. I know you've talked about it before, but anyway, what I was getting at is that Jerry O'Connell's death is the only one that I actually feel bad about in this movie. When I watch
really
it, I do feel he didn't deserve that.
No, and
he didn't deserve to be dating some girl that didn't disclose her history to him about being part of a mass murder.
If we can just say that Gail and Dewey are fine, why can't we just say that fucking Jerry O'Connell's character?
Because he got shot in the chest and then just left.
That's
true.
That's
true. He's just bled out. If he didn't die immediately, he just...
I will say that casting Jerry O'Connell as that character, best casting, because I wouldn't have necessarily felt that way that you're describing if it wasn't Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah,
I think that there's like
the thing is, he came off of doing Trip McNeely, like the movie before this or something That's what I knew him as from.
I knew him as Joe from Joe's Apartment.
Joe's Apartment.
Put down that smartphone and listen to me. I'm Matthew Milligan, professional musician and lifelong Weird Al fan. Each week, I'm joined by professional podcaster and close personal friend Matt Kelly to take a dive off the deep end into the vast career of pop culture icon Weird Al Yankovic on our show, Weird Algorithm. Along with some very special guests from the worlds of music and comedy, we tackle every song, every television appearance, and every bit of sketch comedy Al has produced in chronological order, covering the good old days of My Bologna and Eat It, the fun zone of tacky and white and nerdy, and everything in between. As we go, we're ranking the songs, albums, and music videos in the hopes of creating the ultimate guide to a career bigger than the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota. So the next time you're having one of those days, stuck in a traffic jam, wondering why does this always happen to me, just kick off your sneakers and stick around for a while because we've got it all on Weird Algorithm. Available wherever you get your podcasts. And now you know. Was that enough references?
Here's a question for Kyle that I think I know the answer to. But if we're talking about illogical things that happened in this movie, at some point, Dewey and Gail sit in front of a TV and a VCR and start watching tapes, and then the signal is somehow interrupted by a live camera all the way in the back of the room that they're in.
Listen. And I think that this was
98? I want to say
98?
98.
I think it's
right?
98.
Because it was a really
It was
quick
96,
turnover.
98.
Like,
Right.
I always want to overshoot the turnover of it. But this thing was... this happened fast after Scream. So, okay. So, like, there's...
Filming in 97. How's that?
We should know better. But I will think that I will say that a general audience might have accepted that as
there should have been they should have looked down and saw a cable running from the back of the TV up to the
and
thing.
Dude, and that's the thing is that, like, I mean, people don't make movies now where they even allow that, like, suspension of disbelief, especially like with technological stuff. Like, I can't imagine trying to be like, nah, this just happens. With, like, you'll get eaten alive. Yeah. Like, so...
Toby Hooper, eaten alive.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll get my
happen.
double feature.
Well, speaking of double features... Oh, this is for me.
I was about to say, Matt,
Speaking of double features, Matt, what would you like?
Yeah,
so, you got to keep it going.
So I'm going to double feature this with a much better movie in which people are getting murdered in a rowdy, crowded movie theater, Popcorn from 1991.
Nice. Now that is a good double feature.
Very nice.
Kyle?
Very nice. I just want to watch Behind the Mask.
God damn, that's a really good one, too. Super good.
I think
Best
it just
meta
has that
besides
extra
Scream.
depth that Scream 2 tries to lend. But
it wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Scream 2.
Exactly. Like, there's no way it would exist if not for Scream 2 specifically. Behind the Mask.
All right.
Yeah, and I was originally going to go with Urban Legend because of the Rebecca Gayheart of it all, but you guys picked really, really good double features. Now, the fact that I mentioned Urban Legend, I really have to share this. I will make up for my lackluster double feature by giving you guys a quick little anecdote from the gym the other day. I don't know why, and I don't know how it even came up in a conversation. But so I go to a relatively small gym that's just down the street from the house, and I go very early in the morning. I'm there between 5:30 and 6:30 a.m. and because then I can come home, take a shower, and get ready for my day of work. I was there with my trainer, and for some odd reason, and now when I'm there with my trainer, I listen to whatever they have over the loudspeakers because it's usually me and my trainer, the owner, and whoever she's training as well. It's usually like 4, maybe 5 people at one time. Like I said, very small private gym. Total Eclipse of the Heart comes on.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh my God. Like, this, I can't listen. Everybody's laughing a little bit. I think it was somebody's Spotify playlist or something. And everybody's kind of giggling because it's such a weird song to come on at a gym at like 6 a.m. And I'm like, man, this just reminds me of Urban Legend and the lady getting her head chopped off. And they're like, what? And I was like, oh, I was thinking my thoughts out loud, wasn't I? And I had to explain to them the part where, like, she's singing Turn Around, and then, and the whole point is that, like, they, there's a killer in the backseat and he chops her head off. Or it's actually a she. It's Rebecca Gayheart. Spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't seen Urban Legend in the last 25 years. But also that does bring it back to Scream 1 because Randy is sitting on the couch and he's watching Halloween and he goes, Jamie, turn around. Behind you, Jamie, behind you. So I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
That didn't come to me when I was telling the story until the very end.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. Well, Scott, whole time you were telling that story, I found myself thinking, what's going on?
Wait, Kyle's got something before the what's going on.
I just want to throw out I want to throw out one more double feature which is The Crazies because of Timothy Olyphant. I just
Okay.
I think watching
One
Is
of
it
the
worth
better
watching?
remakes. Oh, The
honestly,
Crazies is one of the
no.
best remakes of all time.
So that's The Crazies is fantastic.
Never seen it.
You can always get it for $5 at Best Buy or Walmart before they get rid of all their physical media.
Yes,
So,
it's always on the shelf at all
always.
times. So for the What's Going On segment, we don't have it too much. We're just going to tell you, go buy some shirts from our website, hmnpodcast.com. Go find us on our Facebook group or any of our social media by searching HMN Podcast. And check out our Patreon, patreon.com/HMN Podcast. Now, it's time for me to tell you what I've been watching, and then you guys can do the same. I watched the newest film to be dropping on Shudder, Destroy All Neighbors.
I'm so jealous.
Starring Jonah Ray and Alex Winter. There's so many twists and turns in this movie. I feel comfortable telling you the first twist and then letting you guys go from there. Jonah Ray plays a struggling prog rock musician, and he lives in this shitty little apartment in LA, and he gets a new neighbor who is this big Russian guy played by Alex Winter, just caked in tons of prosthetic makeup to make him this like hideous looking creature. And he just blasts Russian techno at full volume, and it makes it hard for Jonah Ray to record his music. So after a couple squabbles, he goes over there to demand that he shuts off the music, and they get into a scuffle that leads to Alex Winter's character slipping, falling, and dying. Jonah Ray, in a panic, chops up the body and decides he's going to get rid of it. And it's at that point that all of the body parts come back to life.
Well, okay.
And that's all I'm going to give you from there. But it is absolute like modern day splat stick. Like, it's so goofy, it's so wacky, but it wears the like Dead Alive, Evil Dead love on its sleeve. The music is fucking awesome. As Kyle pointed out, it's Man, Philly, like proggy indie rock band doing all the music. It's really funny. It's really cool. It's really gory. Fingers crossed, you may or may not have heard me interview the team that made this movie, because I did watch an advanced screening for that very purpose, but I haven't locked in when that interview is going to happen. So who knows? Worst case scenario, I just enjoyed a movie early. Anyway, that's all I've got. So on to you guys.
Yeah, I watched Death Game from '77. So people might remember that Eli Roth remade this obscure horror movie as Knock Knock.
Okay.
In 2015 with Keanu Reeves and Ana de Armas, which is kind of crazy to think about now. But Death Game was re-released recently and is on Shudder, currently available on Shudder. It's about two young girls who basically come to like knock on a random stranger's door and exploit his kindness also, but maybe, in 77 it was exploiting his kindness. In 2023 it's, this dude is maybe taking advantage of the two young girls that knocked on his door. Maybe you should not just accept that. But it's very exploitative. Like, these two girls knock on the door, they are caught in the rain. This gentleman's home alone. He welcomes them in. He gets seduced, and then they are overstaying their welcome in very sort of crazy ways. And it's Sandra Locke, who is fantastic. Like, it has a lot of great performances, but it also has this storied production history that is absolutely insane. It's the Wikipedia for Death Game is longer than the Wikipedia for Scream 2's plot. So it's which we've run into many times with Wes Craven stuff, is like there's just better editing and combing through of what actually happens. But Death Game was fun. I would say that there's some really interesting the production history is that this director was inept. He just was a terrible director. He was actually more of like a producer who was part of a real estate. I think he was part of real estate, so he had all this finance, and like, you know, he would just wanted to direct. So he was produced a bunch of movies. The only two he actually directed was Death Game and Evil Town, which was less than 10 years, like maybe 7 years later. And Evil Town is a mess in its own right. But Death Game's really interesting. It has some really interesting performances. So the cinematography is interesting. Like, it's definitely worth watching as a sort of piece of cult. I wouldn't say history, because it's not like it influenced a ton of stuff, but it is an interesting watch. And if you find yourself wanting something sort of like visually wild while also feeling like, you know, it doesn't inspire funny games, but it elicits that sort of like two people are in your home and you cannot get them out. Like you can no longer, you've opened up your home and now you can't get them out, and that's frightening. Like it elicits some of that, but in a 70s way, in a 70s like young girls hippie era, like, you know, way. So it's really it's fun. It's like
I've actually watched it.
Yeah, have you
I watched
seen
it in the last 6 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's nothing to
time.
write home about, but I enjoyed my watch, and I think that like there's some serious performances and there's some images that stick with me, and like that's cool.
It's very unsettling. It's not my kind of movie, but it's definitely very.
It's unsettling in a way that like Funny Games was too unsettling for me. This one gave me a little bit of like levity, where I was like, oh, there's a little bit of comedy, or like there's a little bit of like I don't really quite like, I don't totally believe this or feel it.
It's
so,
not nearly as mean-spirited as Funny Games. In my opinion.
Right.
Right.
But it's an interesting watch. It's on Shudder.
Right, I'll have to check that out.
And I will finish it off with a book that I read recently. It's called Tender is the Flesh, and it's by an Argentinian writer who I will absolutely butcher her name. So Tender is the Flesh. Easy name to remember, the book, at least. But it is about it's a lot of different things. It's a horror novel, but its core tenet is that there was at some point in the last 15, 20 years, I'd say, a mammalian virus, an animal virus, that made it so that all meat was toxic. And if you ate it, you would die. So what any sensible world would do is obviously to start growing humans for human consumption. And it's sanctioned. I went in almost completely blind, knowing there was a cannibalism book, but that's it. Not knowing that it was more of like a kind of a Handmaid's Tale-y kind of concept of like, you know, this world accepting this horrific concept. I was all in. I loved the concept. I thought that it was incredibly disturbing. And then I was a little disappointed. I think it's a really well-written book. Now, it was also translated. So, I mean, I think it's a good book. So, kudos to the author, kudos to the translators. There are two women, I think, that translated the woman's original work. The only thing that dragged it down, because the last two pages, whatever, are pretty shocking in their own right. On top of some of the other things, it also gives me a bit of a I Am Legend type vibe as well. So, I mean, and I Am Legend is one of my all-time favorite books. So, it's really feeling it, but it does the thing that I don't like, where kind of everybody makes poor decisions. There are almost no likable characters eventually, and that's hard for me. But I think that it's a really, really well constructed world, and I think that it raises a lot of interesting questions. I think that it is definitely worth the read. That's why I'm mentioning it. Just because it didn't do what I wanted with the characters doesn't mean that it's not an important book to be discussed. And it's not long. I think it's only 200 pages. I burnt through it in a day.
Nice. What was the title again?
Tender is the Flesh.
Tender is the Flesh. Got it.
All right, well, I got nothing to bounce off of that with. So I'm just going to say that we will be back next week with even more horror movie night, and stay tuned.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.